All right, all right, all right. Welcome to another edition of Sabbath Lounge. This is Matt.
And Jake here.
And we are coming to you with another edition of Sabbath Lounge. And Jake, what are we doing here lately with this?
We're going through the Torah Portions and just hitting the highlights and trying to give you an overview of what there is to encourage you to read through it yourself.
And we're on week 32, and we're in Leviticus. It's kind of a short one, so this is going to be a really long edition. Leviticus 25 through 26, and it's called
Behar on Mount Sinai.
Behar. All right.
And no one knew that she found Mount Sinai, and yet, Joy Behar.
Oh, Behar. Yes.
This is not an episode of The View.
No.
Okay.
Yes. Thankfully, no Goldberg here. So, but on week 32, we're going to kind of.
But there are some Jews.
Yes.
So there's that.
So when you dive into this passage, it's talking, for one thing, about land being returned, but there's this idea of land purchase. So Jake, why do we say there's a prorated land deal? Why did they have to do that in relation to the 7th year rest?
Well, because, Matt, you see, there was this part of the Torah commands are that the land is supposed to go back to the original owners. When they go into the land, they have plots set out for the different tribes. And if you're to buy some land from one of your
brethren,
cross-tribesmen, then you would have to, I didn't mean for it to sound like that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Another tribe, then if I did it in like year 1, I'm going to pay you a lot of money because I have 6 whole years with that land. Whereas if I buy it in the 6th year, perhaps you should sell it to me for much cheaper because I'm only going to have it this year.
That's right. And maybe I should even try to talk you out of it and go, are you sure you want to buy this from me right now?
Right.
It'd be much better if you waited 2 years and then you give me a lot more money.
Right.
So,
but maybe someone needs some extra land to run some chickens, and that's only going to last a few months.
Yeah.
So
there had to be all kinds of reasons. So, but the land was supposed to rest in the 7th year, and then it even tells you that the 6th year you're going to have a bumper crop enough to sustain you until year 9. And I think that is the hard thing with this concept of, it's similar to the Sabbath where you're having to rely on him for your provision, but for a whole year is a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
And he told them they'd be taken care of. It'd be abundantly clear that they're taken care of. They're going to have a bumper crop. And we know through history, Jake, did they do any of this very well?
I don't know. They did it once. Yeah. I don't think they've completed one cycle of this.
Yeah.
But Matt, back to that point about the bumper crop situation. So basically, it's very easy, and they have it made because they're going to have this bumper crop in year 6, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you've gardened once or twice, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how easy is it to make even a good harvest in your garden last a whole year?
That's very difficult.
There's a lot of preparation, a lot of work goes into that. Huh?
Mm-hmm. So. And, and because they've never done this and they didn't do it very well, you can make an argument that our timeline is skewed and we don't have a good idea of when they call the Shemitah year, when that really is, because it kind of got lost to history. And so people have different opinions. Some people say it was this year, this last year, I've heard all kinds of things. And I think you kind of have to just get peace with and pick one. If you have a property yourself, I think you should do this. And, I'm not going to tell anyone how they need to do it. I think if you wanted to do it kind of like scientifically, you would grow crops for 7-8 years, and you would have a year in there that should be a bumper crop and a really big crop. And that would kind of help you find out what year 6 was.
And I really like that idea. And I also like the idea of going based on when you come into your land.
Yeah,
right?
I think there's nothing wrong with that either.
Yeah, and
that
I think
seems to line up with Scripture.
I think a lot of people have researched this, and a lot of people have talked on this,
mm-hmm.
and none of them agree what the year should be.
No.
And so to me, I mean, you kind of have to go with, I mean, this was a command for when you go into the land. Mm-hmm. So.
And we're not in the land.
Right. So but again, this is practice.
Right. But wouldn't it be interesting if we all did this, those of us that homestead, and you and when we collectively started keeping records of how our crops did, and and then start comparing them, and we might all go, wow, this year was huge, and we're all saying the same thing across the board, no matter where you lived. It might be interesting to see.
Yeah.
But it might reveal that for us.
Sure. So. Exactly. Very interesting.
And this is another thing that I can remember farming with my grandfather, and I asked him, I believe it or not, I read Leviticus with my grandmother when I was a child, and I came across the scripture, and I was like, why don't we do that? And my grandfather was like, Matt, I don't really know why we don't do it, but we don't.
Yeah.
So he didn't have any good answers.
Yeah. And I think too, this also ties into like crop rotation.
Yeah.
And the way that all the minerals in our soil have been so degraded because we don't do this.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that ties in.
Well, soil is a living organism, and that's what a lot of people don't understand. It's a very complex structure, and it involves air and water and microbes and other living organisms, and they all depend on each other. And they all need a rest. They all need a break.
Yeah, I was watching a football game once, and I heard this screaming, and I'm thinking the fans, right? No, it was the ground from all the cleats stabbing it.
Yes.
This living organism.
Yes.
It was just screaming. No.
Yes.
That's a made-up story in jest.
I think it is. So now we've got this one. We're talking about freedom. So we've got Jubilee, liberty to the captives.
So what's the Jubilee?
So every 50 years, you had the Jubilee year. And so during this Jubilee year, everything, it was even bigger than the 7-year one. It was like the really big deal. And they often would measure time, with Jubilees.
Number of Jubilees, right?
And say I've been around one Jubilee or two. I've seen two, but it was supposed to set all the slave people. They weren't really slaves, but what were they? Indentured servants.
Yeah.
They were supposed to be able to go back free, and the original land was supposed to be restored to the original families.
Right.
Which, did they do that?
No.
No.
Yeah, so Jubilees also ties into Feast of Weeks, because you have the 7 sevens, right?
Yeah.
And this 50 days past. So they go 7 sevens, and then the next year. And then this would be announced like at trumpets, right? They would, Jubilee's coming, everyone get ready for the Jubilee. Around the time of trumpets. So,
yeah.
Feast of Trumpets.
And it was a big deal, and it's a beautiful picture. And how different would our society be if we would keep these things? I mean, it kind of equals everybody out and gives everybody a level playing field.
Yeah, and I think it's I think you'd have to, when I was looking at this time around, it's like you need, it's like the Constitution, right? And the founding of America, right? And they said, we've given you a republic if you can keep it, and it's a society built for a moral and just people, and it will fall apart without that. I think same thing here, with the Jubilee and the Shemitah. If you don't have a moral and just people running these things, you could get real into a mess with corruption in it.
Yeah, and the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer.
Yep.
And unfortunately, just to some regards, that happened to them.
Yeah.
So the land returning to its owner. So if this was done correctly, all of the tribes would get their land back, no matter what their status was. And the original land grant that we've read about, where it talks about each tribe and what portion of the land they would get. Debts are forgiven. So the Shemitah year even has debt forgiving in it, and but that's a huge concept for sure, that the debts are being paid for. And don't you think that's a spiritual connotation as well?
Oh, sure, yeah. It's forgiveness, of course. And this here specifically is one of the things that you could see getting abused. Like, oh, my debt will be forgiven, so I'll just run up massive debts, and then who cares? I'm not going to have to pay it back. That's evil. So don't do that. Don't worry, the government will pay for my school debts now.
Yeah.
So that's not how it's supposed to work.
Joe Biden got it.
He did that.
Yes. So debts are forgiven. And then we've got this concept of redeeming your brothers, the kinsman redeeming. So what do you think that means about redeeming your brothers?
I think that's just kind of a like, if your brother, and it says in this portion, it talks about if your brother is downtrodden, help him out.
Yeah, if they're in a bind, if they're in a bad way, don't ignore them. You should go intervene and help.
Right. And it even points to not just your brother, but the stranger.
Yeah. And when it says stranger in those passages, I don't believe it's talking about someone who was completely pagan and foreign to you. This stranger is probably someone that's abiding in your household or your neighbor's household, and they're doing the things you're doing.
Right. It's
they're just not flesh and blood.
Yeah, it's not just strangers. It's the strangers sojourning with you.
Yeah.
So.
And they weren't supposed to charge interest. Who weren't they supposed to charge interest to?
Y'all brothers.
That's right. And so through history, some weird things developed, and so the Jewish people were often got into banking because they would loan to people who weren't their brothers, and then they could be like, "Yeah, we're going to charge you interest,"
right?
Because technically, they weren't supposed to charge their brother, and so it didn't matter,
right?
But that sometimes probably got abused, but and they weren't supposed to. And then he comes again about no idols, keeping the Sabbath. He says it a lot.
Remember it and keep it.
And then Isaiah 61, 1 through 12. Will you read that for us?
1 through 2?
1 through 2, yes. Not
Got you. Okay. Yahweh will anoint his servant with his spirit. The Ruach of Adonai Yahweh is with me, because Yahweh has anointed me to deliver good news to humble people. He has sent me to heal those who are brokenhearted, to announce that captives will be set free and prisoners will be released. He has sent me to announce the year of Yahweh's goodwill and the day of our Elohim's vengeance, to comfort all those who grieve.
So it's definitely a beautiful picture. And these, the Shemitah year and the Jubilee, represent this concept of he's setting people free, and it's all because of him.
And he's delivering this good news to who? Humble people. Mm-hmm. Because if you're prideful and this goes downhill real quick.
Mm-hmm. And well, if you're prideful, you're going to have a hard time doing all of this. You're not going to want to set people free. You're not going to want to tell them they don't owe you any money anymore. Those are very hard things. And I think that's why they didn't keep these things very well, because, let's face it, people are kind of greedy.
People are greedy.
Yeah. And so not much has changed. It's still around today. And then Isaiah 58, 6.
This is the kind of fasting I have chosen. Loosen the chains of wickedness. Untie the straps of the yoke. Let the oppressed go free, and break every yoke.
Break every yoke. And then, and wasn't there a concept of, was it one of the prophets, was it Elijah or Elisha? Maybe it's Elisha, that when he gets called to go with Elijah, he breaks the yoke and burns it.
Yes. He's got the 12 oxen.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Which also has to be a significant number. But yeah, that's an interesting side study, and I believe the concept's connected.
Yeah. And just let's be honest here.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you go Elijah and Elisha living at the same time?
It's confusing.
Does that confuse things or make it easier?
It's confusing.
Yes.
My whole life.
Jeroboam, Rehoboam.
Mm-hmm.
Which one's the good one?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same kind of thing.
You know.
And then Matthew 11:28 through 30.
Come to me, all who are tired from carrying heavy loads, and I will give you rest. Place my yoke over your shoulders and learn from me, because I am gentle and humble. Then you will find rest for yourselves, because my yoke is easy and my burden is light.
So all connected scripture. All
right.
Connected.
So something about, this is Yeshua talking,
mm-hmm.
and he says, wear his yoke on your shoulders. And so he does have a yoke, but it's light.
Yeah, it's light and fluffy.
Right.
Fluffy?
I think that's what he meant. Fluffy.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of light.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we're at the end of week 32 here in Leviticus 25 through 26:2. Anything else we left out you want to bring up?
No, kind of a short chapter. Well, I mean, chapter 25 is kind of long, but a short portion in the scheme of things. So this is Behar on Mount Sinai.
All right. Well, we appreciate you stopping by and taking some time with us, and we encourage you to continue to search the scriptures and seek this out on your own. Don't take our word for it, huh?
Right. Give us some likes and some comments. Let us know what you think about the content that is being provided. And this is just us kind of doing our studies and putting it out there for posterity.
That's right. And, well, we appreciate you stopping by. And this concludes this. And this is Matt and
Jake signing out.